This is going to be part 2 of the 1.4 Aplia assignment video. This is going to be an explanation of the differences between validity and strength, and soundness and cogency, and then some practice differentiating between those types of arguments. Okay, so validity and soundness are terms that really only apply to deductive arguments. And we use two other words, strength and cogency, to talk about inductive arguments. And at first that may seem pretty silly, and in some sense it is. But the reason that we do this is because technically every single inductive argument is invalid. Because every single inductive conclusion is possibly false. And so it's always going to fail the validity test. And so to counterbalance that, we come up with a different term, what we call strength, so that we don't have to have all these invalid inductive arguments. So we use a different word, strength, to describe the value of inductive arguments, where we use validity to describe the value of deductive arguments. But the words strength and cogency work in the same way that validity and soundness do for deductive arguments. When I've got an inductive argument, when I'm assessing strength, what I'll do is I'll assume for the sake of argument the premises are true, and then ask, do those premises make the conclusion more likely if they're true? And if the answer is yes, it's strong. If it's no, they don't make it more likely, and or they make it weaker, then it's going to be a weak argument. Right? Just like with soundness, just like with validity for deductive arguments, I assume the premises are true, and then see what that does to force the truth of the conclusion. And so let's look at some examples of that here. So here I have whales and dolphins are both mammals. So because whales cannot breathe underwater but must come up to the ocean's surface to breathe, it's likely, right, this is what gives it away as an inductive argument, that dolphins must also swim to the surface to breathe. All right. Now I happen to already know that dolphins have to come up to the surface to breathe air, but I should put that on the back burner for now, because what I'm doing is going to assume the premises are true. Right? I'm going to assume whales and dolphins are both mammals. I'm also going to assume that because whales can't breathe, they have to come up to the Earth's surface. And then ask, well, if those two things are true, is it more likely that dolphins swim to the surface to breathe air? And there I want to say, yeah, it's not like airtight. And I could think of reasons why dolphins might not do it, because maybe there's some dissimilarities between whales and dolphins that I don't know about. But assuming these two things are true, it at least makes that conclusion more likely, so that's a strong argument. And that's the sort of method I should use for every single one of these. Assume the premises are true, ask, is the conclusion more likely because of those premises, or is it less likely? If it's more likely, it's strong. If it's less likely, it's weak. All right, let's move on then to cogency. So cogency is to soundness what strength was to validity. For deductive arguments, after I'd figured out whether it was valid, I would go back and say, are those premises actually true? If it is, it's sound. Same thing here. For inductive arguments, we test whether it's strong first. And then if the premises of that strong argument are actually true, it's cogent. If they're not actually true, it's uncogent. Or if the argument was weak in the first place, it's also uncogent. So let's look at some examples of this. Here's the argument. Most professional athletes get plenty of exercise. Barack Obama is a professional athlete. Therefore, it follows that Barack Obama gets plenty of exercise. All right. If these things were true, so if it was true that most professional athletes get plenty of exercise, and that Barack Obama is a professional athlete, is it more likely that Barack Obama gets plenty of exercise? Yeah, it is. Right? So that's a strong argument. That conclusion is more likely if those premises are true. But now, are these premises actually true? Well, the first one I think is. Most professional athletes get plenty of exercise. Probably all of them do. I guess. Well, I take that back. It would depend on the sport, I suppose. But even though that premise is true, Barack Obama being a professional athlete is not true. Right? He was a lawyer, he was a senator, he was the president, he was never a professional athlete. So it does not have all true premises. At least one of them is false. And therefore the argument is uncogent. So we're stating here, if any premise is false, it's uncogent. Just like with soundness. If any premise is false, it's unsound. And that's how you'd approach that set of exercises. The implications of strength and cogency, this is just like the validity and soundness implications. They're going to give me a scenario and then ask me some questions about it. Now, the problem with the inductive arguments with strength and cogency is there's going to be a lot of wiggle compared to validity, where I would know things more certainly because of the strictness of validity and soundness requirements. So let's look at the first one here. Suppose you have an argument that is weak and has all true premises. All right, well, if it's weak, that means that the premises don't really relate too much to the conclusion, and or they make the conclusion less likely. So if they're true, that doesn't really matter to the conclusion. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false, maybe it actually makes it weaker. So given this information, what do you know about the cogency? Well, because it's weak, it's automatically uncogent. Right? The argument must be uncogent because no weak argument can be cogent. It's got to be strong first. Right? So that's how you do these. And then lastly here that I'll talk about this comparison between validity, soundness, strength, and cogency. This is a good exercise that tests all the things at once. It's going to give you an argument. You got to figure out whether it's deductive or inductive because that is going to tell you whether you need to do validity, soundness, strength, or cogency, and then you're going to work from there. So take argument A. Because Alaska is south of California and California is south of Mexico, right? So you should be trying to arrange this in your head, or if you can't do that, like write this out. So we have California, and then below that is Alaska, and then California is south of Mexico. So in order of arrangement, you have Mexico at the top, then California, then Alaska. All right. It follows that Alaska is south of Mexico. Yeah, it does. Alaska is south of Mexico because it's south of California. So this is an argument that sort of by definition, by the language involved, this conclusion has to be true. So it's deductive. It's not inductive. It's not probable that Alaska is south of Mexico. It's guaranteed, given the truth of the premises. All right. So it's a deductive argument, and it's also valid because if these things are true, it forces that conclusion to be true. And then I have to figure out, is it sound, right? So is Alaska south of California? No, it's not. So automatically there's one premise at least that's false. So this is an unsound argument. And that's how you would approach all the rest of these.